Hello, and welcome to the Freed Black Girl Podcast. This show is a guide to self liberation, pulling the curtain back on healing through the power of storytelling. This show is dedicated to any and everyone doing the work to free their inner child, and for those with a desire and not quite knowing where to begin. My name is Najma Ahmed, and I am the host and creator of the Freed Black Girl Podcast. I'll take you on my own journey to liberating the little black girl in me. Thank you for coming along on this ride to our collective freedom. Because as Fannie Lou Hamer said, nobody's free until everybody's free. Hello, everyone. It's been a while. Welcome back to all of my listeners who've been with me since the first season. Also, welcome to all the new folks who are joining. It has been so beautiful to watch this podcast grow. I've been off for almost 2 months now since the last season ended, but it was just such a beautiful opportunity for me to share my story, to share with you all these wonderful experts that I had on to dig deeper into what does healing actually look like? Why does healing matter? And if you've listened to the first season, I really talk about my desire to want to do this because we are in the midst of what seems like an onslaught of unprecedented times, and they're going to continue. And it is so necessary that we get grounded, that we get rooted into who we are individually, but also who we are as a community. And then also, as I ended the last season, as I thought about my own healing that took place after I released all of these things that I had been working through, but now putting them out into the world and the whole internet now knowing my business, and getting over my own fears of being seen, of people, how I've been perceived and things of that nature. I'm now at this space of starting to ask myself, so now what? Right? Like, once we get free, we get to reimagine our worlds. After we come through this healing, we get to think about, how do I want to show up in the world as this freed version of myself who's no longer holding on to all of this baggage that I've been carrying around for the past 39 years, right? And so, as I was reflecting and thinking about, what do I want to say in season 2? Season 1 was all about, again, my healing journey, how we can heal, how do we get free, what does that look like, why is it important to heal? I wanted season 2 to now be about what comes after that part, after we get grounded, after we discover who we truly are outside of what everyone else has told us we are, after we get this clarity, how do we then start to dream again? How do we start to reimagine, particularly when we're in a time, um, as we are in now, especially in this country where systems are falling, where everything that we have known is no longer true? It can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming, especially if we feel like we don't have a blueprint to follow. And as we enter into 2025, it can feel like we're kind of flying without a map, that we are in, like I said, these continuous unprecedented times. But when I took a step back and I really started to think about what I wanted to say this season, I started to think about the ancestors, of course, and our elders. And I remember that none of this is new. None of this is new. America has always been America. This world, when we think about capitalism, when we think about quote unquote white supremacy, that is what has fueled us to this point of collapse. But that also means that because we are here, because we know that every Black person you see is a walking miracle, that we were able to survive, that we were able to thrive, that means that there are lessons to be learned. That means that there are people who came before us who navigated unimaginable circumstances and were able to survive. But like I said, beyond survive, they were able to set forth the conditions that allow us to thrive, that allow me to be sitting here talking to you all right now in the midst of it all. And so I started to reflect and I asked myself, what is it that I want to say? What is the value that I want to put back into the world in this moment? What do I feel is needed? What is the medicine, right? And what came to me was we have to remember our teachers. We look around society in this country, we have forces who are using fear to distract us, to divide us, to keep us focused on what the racists are doing. Somehow our ancestors and our elders were able to build communities coming straight out of enslavement, were able to build universities. During Jim Crow, being beaten and sprayed with water hoses, we're still able to muster up enough collective action to dismantle racism in many of the laws, in the way, in that iteration of Jim Crow laws and overt segregation. And we'll get more into that in this episode. But each generation is called to pick up the baton and carry it forward. And it's our turn. We are the ones we've been waiting for. But we have to remember the lessons of our teachers. And so I started to ask myself, who are my teachers? Who are those ancestors, those elders, those freedom fighters that have inspired me as a student of sociology, as a student of history? Who are those people? And so, of course, Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, Shirley Chisholm. For me, Ida B. Wells, Fred Hampton, Malcolm X, Audre Lorde, Nikki Giovanni, Angela Davis. Those are some of my teachers. And so I started to think about the lessons that they've taught me over the years. And kind of a through line from all of them was the audacity to dream, even in the face of violence and lynching and Jim Crow and sexism and homophobia. They still knew that another way was possible, and they had the audacity to pursue it. They had the audacity to push forward and to not get captured by the white gaze, to not get captured by what the racists are doing, because they knew that the racists are going racist. And so it is our job to understand society in a different way, to understand the truth of what is happening, but to still move forward. And as I said, that is why I wanted to have the first season, because the fear is going to come, but the healing is what allows us to move forward and not be paralyzed by the fear. Fear is human nature. It's going to be there. As Audre Lorde says, when I dare to be powerful in service to my vision, it matters less and less whether or not I'm afraid. And so I knew that season 2 was going to need to be a response of, okay, once we free our minds and we get to this collective liberation place, then what? What's next? How do we dream? How do we tune out the noise, which is very real, and I don't wanna minimize it because I know that people have the potential to be hurt through policies, through action. It's the unknown. But I also know that our power is focusing on what we have control over. And one thing that we have always had control over is our imaginations. As we hear often, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. They were still able to dream. That's what Afrofuturism is. The idea that Black people would even exist in the future, living under circumstances that sought to wipe us out from those futures. We still believed. And so there is a blueprint that has been left for us. But we have to stop looking over there and being focused on what they are doing in order to tap back into the blueprint. And that's what season 2 is. And that's what the message was that came to me, is that we have to remember our teachers. And so I wanted to do this episode. This is somewhat of a bonus episode. I wanted to introduce season 2, but then also just kind of give you all something to listen to on today as an antithesis to any other toxicity that may be flying in the air. But then also today I wanted to highlight another teacher, Martin Luther King Jr. And it's interesting because growing up Muslim, I was a Malcolm X girl. I lived under that idea that we had to choose one or the other, that it was Malcolm or Martin. And I had this kind of preconceived notion that Martin Luther King was the more passive one. And I was a little baby militant revolutionary. And so why I didn't, disrespect Martin Luther King Jr., he didn't necessarily resonate as much with me until I got older. And I learned how much his legacy had been whitewashed, how sanitized his views, his teachings really were, particularly when I started to work in the realm of economic justice. And so when I was thinking about putting this episode together, I really just meditated on, like, what do I want to say? I asked the ancestors. Every time I do something, I ask the ancestors, what message do you want me to share with people? And I kind of just meditate on that. And actually, I will share with you all some of the messages that came through. I'm tired of living a life in response to whiteness. you can see how this season is going to go. So go ahead and buckle up. I'm tired of living a life in response to whiteness, in response to patriarchy, in response to this limited, constricting view of humanity. It is taking too much of our time and our energy, and it is what they want. I'll get into another episode with Toni Morrison, but one of her quotes that I just live by, and I'm just going to give a brief clip of it or a version of it, but that the very serious function of racism is to keep us distracted. It is to keep us exhausted. Someone tells you, she says, someone tells you you have no history, so you spend your time proving that you do. Someone tells you that your head isn't shaped properly, and you get a bunch of scientists together and you spend all these resources and time proving that that's not true. But that the goalposts will always be moved, that there will always be something else to drain our energy, to distract us, to keep us fighting this fight that means nothing, that we will never prove that we are enough for a group of people who don't even want us to exist. And so, as we know, where our attention goes, our energy flows. And I am tired. I'm going to read it again. I'm tired of living a life in response to whiteness, in response to patriarchy, in response to this limited, constricting view of humanity. It is taking too much of our time and our energy. And so, as I was meditating on that, but I knew that I wanted to talk about Dr. King in this episode, I was wondering, how can I do this knowing the very real desire of Dr. King for integration, to make sure that we had this seat at the table, right? When I think about Shirley Chisholm as well, oftentimes it was, we want a seat at the table. We want to be able to have access. We want to be able to move freely in this country that we built, which I understand completely. But as I'm thinking about this moment now and where we are in this country, it is, I know a lot of people feel like they're over it. They're over the kumbaya. They're over this desire to fit into this system anymore, right? I talk about it in season 1, getting out of these systems. I just recently decided that I'm no longer consulting because I don't want to operate within the system anymore. I want to be able to say what I want to say and do what I want to do and imagine a new world outside of the gaze of whiteness, outside of a system that was designed to enslave people who look like me or oppress people who love how I love. And so in my research for this episode, I actually was a little surprised to come across this clip that I'm going to play in a second of Martin Luther King Jr. expressing somewhat similar sentiments about a year or so before his assassination. And so this episode, I want us to shine a light on the lessons of the revolutionary Martin Luther King Jr., not the whitewashed, sanitized, safe for white gaze version of Martin Luther King Jr.
I'm tired of marching. Tired of marching for something that should have been mine at birth. I don't mind saying to you tonight, I don't mind saying to you tonight that I'm tired of the tension surrounding our day. I don't mind saying to you tonight that I'm tired of living every day under the threat of death. I have no martyr complex. I want to live as long as anybody in this building tonight. And sometimes I begin to doubt whether I'm going to make it through. I must confess I'm tired. Well, I don't
confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments, and I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go, and that we are involved in a war on Asian soil, which, if not checked and stopped, can poison the very soul of our nation. I'm not going to say that all of our problems will be solved if the war in Vietnam is ended, but I do say that the war makes it infinitely more difficult to deal with these problems. When a nation becomes obsessed with the guns of war, it loses its social perspective, and programs of social uplift suffer. This is just a fact of history, so that we do face many more difficulties as a result of the war.
And I don't know if you've heard those clips before, but it was so powerful to me. And if you're watching this, even seeing the look in his eyes and the pain in his face about dedicating so much of his career and his life to what he has known as this nonviolent protest and as the fight for integration and for marching, but now just being tired. And I feel like so many of us are there, and I felt it so much when I saw it and wanting to share it with you all, because even though he was tired, he kept going forward because he still had a belief that something was possible, but his view on that something was starting to shift towards the end of his life. Another message that came to me when I was meditating and reflecting on what I wanted to say in this episode. And so if you watch the first season, I talk about how I grew up. I grew up in going to school in predominantly white neighborhoods because my mom wanted to make sure that we had access to a high level of education, because segregation in America is still real, particularly in schools based on the zip code that you are born in. But I would always have this overwhelming feeling because I was one of maybe 5 Black kids in any school that I attended, and oftentimes the only Black kid in my class. And so something that came to me again when I was meditating on what I wanted to say in this episode was that ever since I was a kid, I would long for the weekends when I did not have to think about white people anymore, what they were doing, what they thought about me, how to keep myself safe from them. I tell a story in the first season about getting in trouble in school because we were learning about Christopher Columbus. And the teacher asked, tell us what Christopher Columbus brought to America. And I said that Christopher Columbus didn't discover America because there were already people here, and that he just brought disease, right? I think I was like in the third grade. And I got in trouble. I got my name on the board. They called my mom. My mom was like, she told the truth. What are you calling me for? So, but that desire to get out of that white gaze, to be in this space and know like, oh, they're lying to us. Like somebody is not telling the truth. This is something that has always been with me. And so it is getting louder. And that is why I wanted to focus on this in this season too. And that is the message that is coming through. I also found this next clip that I'm going to play from Harry Belafonte, and he talks about Dr. King again towards the end of his life and how he began to shift even his views on integration.
The thing Dr. King ever said to me 5 days, as a matter of fact, before he was murdered, was he was at my home. He had just finished a strategy meeting on the Poor People's Campaign. And he seemed quite agitated after what we thought was a very successful gathering and discussion. And he said to me, I said, what's the matter, Martin? You seem very agitated. He said, well, I am. Because I've come upon a thought that I don't know how to deal with at this moment. I said, well, what is it? He says, we fought long for integration. It looks like we're going to get it. I think we get the laws. He says, but I'm afraid that I've come upon something I don't know quite what to do with. I'm afraid that we're integrating into a burning house. And when we asked for further clarification, Andy Young was with me at that time, my wife, others. He said, America's lost whatever little moral vision it had. Its moral sense has run away from the nation. And a nation that is not governed by morality and moral principles is a nation that's headed for an abyss. And I think black people have been struggling to get into this system. They've been getting into a system that in the final analysis is a Sodom and Gomorrah. Will not work because its selfish goals, its need for profit, its need for supremacy, its need to be the best has clouded its moral vision. And with no moral vision, no nation can be healthy enough to lead its people anywhere except to destruction.
And that resonated with me so much. Another thing that came to me when I was thinking about this episode, a message that came to me was, we are no longer to live in the absence of freedom. We are to live as if we have the freedom to do anything we want. If our ancestors could come out of enslavement and build Black communities, build Black schools and universities, why now are we afraid of racist and white supremacist systems not wanting to teach our histories and shutting down DEI offices? We can bring back our community schools. Why are we afraid of dwindling resources given to our young people? We can bring back the free breakfast programs of the Black Panthers. While that fear does still live in our bodies because the terrorism enacted upon our ancestors and elders, which is why healing is so critical, to be able to move that trauma from our bodies. But they were still able to do these things in the midst of it all. Our ancestors were not sitting around, clearly, scrolling on X or on Instagram or wherever, spending their days wondering what the racists are doing. The racists are gone racist. In the words of another philosopher, another Martin,
Fuck them, girl. Fuck them. Fuck them, girl. Fuck them. Fuck them, girl. Fuck them.
and I mean that sincerely. But that's what I talk about in the first season, that our revolution first begins within our minds. That nobody again can take our imagination. And when we nurture these inner worlds, it manifests outwardly. And we give that energy to each other. We don't put that energy into taking in that fear, because then we fall back into these patterns. And I know it's hard and I know it's scary, but it's been done. Our ancestors have done it. And it's on us to now learn, how do we pick up that baton and carry the race forward in a new way, in a different way, but with their lessons. I want to share this a little bit longer clip from Martin Luther King Jr. He was giving a speech in Atlanta to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference Leadership Board. And this speech took place in 1967. It is entitled, "Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community?" And I think it's very poignant for today. And so that's why I wanted to play the longer clip as we think about where do we go from here if we are really about the business of being liberated in this collective liberation. How do we move forward? How do we choose community over chaos?
I want to say to you as I move to my conclusion, as we talk about where do we go from here, that we must honestly face the fact that the movement must address itself to the question of restructuring the whole of American society. There are 40 million poor people here. And one day we must ask the question, why are there 40 million poor people in America? And when you begin to ask that question, you're raising a question about the economic system, about a broader distribution of wealth. When you ask that question, you begin to question the capitalistic economy. And I'm simply saying that more and more, we've got to begin to ask questions about the whole society. We are called upon to help the discouraged beggars in life's marketplace. But one day we must come to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. It means that questions must be raised. And you see, my friends, when you deal with this, you begin to ask the question, who owns the oil? You begin to ask the question, who owns the iron ore? You begin to ask the question, why is it that people have to pay water bills in a world that's 2/3 water? These are words that must be said. Now, don't think you have me in a bind today. I'm not talking about communism. What I'm talking about is far beyond communism. My inspiration didn't come from Karl Marx. My inspiration didn't come from Engels. My inspiration didn't come from Trotsky. My inspiration didn't come from Lenin. Yes, I read Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital a long time ago. And I saw that maybe Marx didn't follow Hegel enough. He took his dialectics, but he left out his idealism and his spiritualism, and he went over to a German philosopher by the name of Feuerbach and took his materialism and made it into a system that he called dialectical materialism. I have to reject that. What I'm saying to you this morning, communism forgets that life is individual. Capitalism forgets that life is social. The kingdom of brotherhood is found neither in the thesis of communism nor the antithesis of capitalism, but in a higher synthesis. It's found in a higher synthesis that combines the truths of both. Now, when I say questioning the whole society, it means ultimately coming to see that the problem of racism, the problem of economic exploitation, and the problem of war are all tied together. These are the triple evils that are interrelated. And if you will let me be a preacher just a little bit. One night a juror came to Jesus, and he wanted to know what he could do to be saved. Jesus didn't get bogged down on the kind of isolated approach of what you shouldn't do. Jesus didn't say, now, Nicodemus, you must stop lying. He didn't say, Nicodemus, now you must not commit adultery. He didn't say, now, Nicodemus, you must stop cheating if you're doing that. He didn't say, Nicodemus, you must stop drinking liquor if you're doing that excessively. He said something altogether different because Jesus realized something basic. That if a man will lie, he will steal. And if a man will steal, he will kill. So instead of just getting bogged down on one thing, Jesus looked at him and said, Nicodemus, you must be born again. In other words, your whole structure must be changed. A nation that will keep people in slavery for 244 years will thingify them and make them things. And therefore they will exploit them and poor people generally, economically. And a nation that will exploit economically will have to have foreign investments and everything else, and it will have to use its military might to protect them. All of these problems are tied together. What I'm saying today is that we must go from this convention and say, America, you must be born again.
That is what season 2 is about. That is what we're going to dig into. Every episode will highlight a new teacher. And bit by bit, I will unfold the way forward as I see it from our ancestors, from our elders, from our teachers, from the work that has been done, but also the work that still remains. And beyond the work, the love, the community, the joy, the power, still about our healing. And so I'm excited to have you join. Class will be in session beginning in March. I have a lot of exciting things in store. I hope that you will look down in the description. Go to the website. We launched the merch line. If you're watching online, the shirt that I have on, the Free Black Girl Society, and so many other really exciting things are coming that are connected to season 2 as well. Yes, I want you all to have cute shirts and hoodies, but we're going to get deeper. We're going to get deeper into these resources. So also make sure that you are signing up for the mailing list. That link is also down below. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube page so you get notifications when the new episodes are dropping. But we've got work to do, y'all. It is time for us to get curious again. It is time to lean back into the intellectual side of things. We have some learning to do. If there was not power in these lessons, they would not be trying to shut down history being taught in this country. And they can't shut it down because our ancestors did not go to schools where Black history was taught, but they were still able to pass down these traditions. We're more powerful than what a school board decides can be taught in a school. We are more powerful than someone saying who we are allowed to love. Love is love, knowledge is knowledge. And it is up to us to be fearless in the pursuit of all of it. And I look forward to going on this journey with you all. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Do not let the fear paralyze us. Even as Dr. King was facing down the end of his life, and he knew that he may not make it and that his life would be likely cut short. But he kept going. and he kept moving forward. And we have the power to do the same. I love you all. I'm excited for this season. We've got this. We've got this, y'all. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Freed Black Girl Podcast. Remember to like, share, subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend. Sending you much love, good energy, and peace. Until next time.
I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all the chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things that I should say. Say them loud, say them clear, for the whole round world to hear. I wish I could share all the love that's in my heart.